To get started, I want you to think of the friend you like to be around the most. It's your favorite person to be with. So picture them in your mind. Maybe they're so fun to be around that everybody wants to hang around with them. Maybe they're so nice they literally make you want to be a nicer person. They work so hard that his or her teammates work harder because of them. Got it? Good. Now think about how good it feels to be with them. Now, think about the opposite. You know somebody who is so mean, other people always feel on edge around them. Always so ticked off, they kind of bring the mood down. So loud, you literally have to shout to talk over them. The whole room gets louder because they're there. Whether it's a good thing or not so good effect, here's what's true about nearly everybody that has a significant effect on the people around them. They don't really think about it. They either don't realize they have an effect on others, or they haven't put thought into how they could use that effect. That's what makes this series so interesting and so tricky. For the next few weeks, we're talking about the you effect, about how you affect the people and the situations around you. In other words, we're talking about influence. Now, for some of you, your influence is obvious. People listen to you. Maybe you hold a position of leadership, either at church or at school. Or you have friends and you understand that people listen to you and almost always take your opinion seriously. Whether it's about something serious like who your friend should date, to something random like who the best Avenger is. And by the way, I think that Doctor Strange is the most influential Avenger. Prove me wrong. On the other hand, some of you may say, I don't impact or influence anyone. The me effect is zero. The only person I ever influence is my family pet, and even they ignore me. You may say, people don't go anywhere or do anything because of me. I'm not an influencer, like at all, and I don't really want to be. Either way, that's totally normal. And either way, the truth is this: no matter what you think, no matter what I think about influence, it's possible, even probable, that you don't realize how much effect you have, or what could happen because of it. We're going to look at someone who used what they had to affect others, even though they didn't have very much. It's recorded in one of the Gospels, which are 4 books in the New Testament in the second half of the Bible that tell us about Jesus' life. What we'll read today was recorded by John, who is one of Jesus' closest followers and students. In fact, when Jesus was on the cross, one of the last things Jesus did was ask John to care for his mother after he died. So we can read these words knowing that they were written by an eyewitness who was trusted by Jesus. Now, let me set the scene. When Jesus traveled around in his 3 years of ministry, crowds almost always followed. It could have been because they heard about Jesus, wanted healing for something, or they were just curious. But whatever the reason, Jesus had a lot of influence and people were always around him. This particular day was no different. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Imagine the scene. A large crowd has gathered to see the great miracle worker, Jesus. And what does Jesus do? He asks one of his disciples, Philip, what they should do. If I were like Philip, I'd been like, aren't you the miracle guy? I think this is your area. But instead, Philip responds this way. Philip answered him, it would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. In other words, you've got to be kidding me. If we're going to feed everyone, there better be someone with a lot of cash around to make that happen, which is a good point. I mean, can you imagine sending someone in McDonald's to order 5,000 Big Macs? I mean, it's crazy, right? The story continues. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many? So apparently, only one mom in the entire village packed a lunch for her son. And Andrew thought this was worth pointing out. I mean, it was something. And that's when Jesus went to work. Jesus said, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left. Let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, surely this is the prophet who has come into the world. Now, there are all types of questions that come up when I read this story. Was it buffet style? Where did the baskets come from? How exactly did he turn 5 loaves and 2 fish into enough food to feed everyone? But here is maybe the most important question we could ask. Who had the most important impact in this passage? Who had the biggest impact in this passage? Well, to me, this question is like asking who the most important Avenger was. I mentioned that I believe that Doctor Strange was the most important. But without Iron Man, Captain Marvel, Captain America, the Hulk, I mean, could they have defeated Thanos? So think about the different characters in John 6. Who was the most important? Was it Jesus? The crowds? The disciples? The boy? Who was it? We have to say right off the bat that this is all about Jesus. The book of John was written to point to Jesus and to show that Jesus is God. He is powerful in what he does and what he says, and people should follow him and worship him. It's all about Jesus. Jesus is the hero. But what about the boy? Even if he isn't the hero, he had great influence. What if he wasn't there? What if the bread and fish were absent? Jesus would have found another way. He made water out of wine. He made the entire universe out of nothing. He could make food to feed the people. But he didn't. He used the boy and whatever the boy had. And it was his willingness to give up his lunch that ended up impacting thousands of people. Can you imagine how the conversation went with his mom when he got home that afternoon? There were thousands of people there, and they picked my lunch. No one, not even his mom, could have imagined things going that way. But they did. And thousands of years later, we're still telling his story. I bet this kid and everyone around this kid never thought influence like this would be part of his story. It didn't matter that he didn't take the stage. He wasn't well known or in a position of leadership. He wasn't a speaker or a preacher. He wasn't super athletic or popular or academic. He wasn't cool or interesting enough that the writer would tell his name. Jesus wasn't looking for any of that. The only reason that mattered was that the boy brought all he had. And it was enough. Because ultimately, this is about the power of Jesus and what Jesus was capable of doing through someone who was willing to be used to offer what he had. When it comes to you affecting the world around you, it's all about you being willing to show up and offer what you have. But before that's possible, you have to recognize this. You have more of an effect than you think. The way we see influence needs to change. It's time we begin to realize that having influence and impact is really just being willing to do something with what you have, no matter how big or small what you have is. In other words, having an impact isn't about doing more, having more, or knowing more people. It's about offering what you already have to those around you. It's about choosing to believe, even when it seems unbelievable, that you have an effect on your friend. You have an effect on your band. You have an effect on your teammates. You have an effect on your brothers and sisters. You have an effect on your classmates. You have an effect on everybody around you. And then just imagine what God could do with the you effect in the world around you. Even if that feels impossible, or it seems like you don't have a ton of effect, just allow your mind to consider the possibility that what Jesus did with the little boy's lunch is something he can do with your influence. As you think about it, here's a few steps to consider. Identify the who. Who are the immediate people in front of you that you have the potential to influence? Who are the people closest to you? Maybe it's your siblings, a friend, a teammate, or other people in your family. Identify the who. Next, identify the what. What is it that the people around you need? Is it encouragement, time, someone to listen, someone to help them with homework? So identify the need. Identify the who, identify the need, and then identify what you can do to help, and then do it. Before we end, I want you to think about a person in your life who has affected you in a positive way. It could be the same person you thought of when I asked who's your favorite person to be around, or it could be someone different. Who has affected you in a positive way? What was it about them that allowed them to have an impact on you? How did their influence impact your life for good? In the same way that others have had an effect on you, you have the same ability to have an effect on others. The question to ask yourself isn't, do I have the ability to impact others? Instead, the question should be, how will I use the influence that I already have? Ultimately, God is the one who has the power to change people. All you have to do is show up, offer what you have, and let Him do the rest. You have more of an effect than you think. Tonight, during our Zoom meeting, I want to talk about two areas that you can impact. One's here in the church, and one is outside the church. But come ready to talk about the you effect, because God wants to use you.